So in this second video I'm doing on the latest version of Topaz, I'm going to be looking at the new model that they've introduced, which is called Starlight. Starlight was something that you could only do online. Now they've released a version which you can use on your local machine. Obviously they've been looking at ways of improving their upscaling, and that's why they'd introduced Iris and they'd introduced Rhea, as well as developing Proteus and so on. But I think they got to a stage of, well, what can we do next? How can we use some of this other fancy AI stuff that's been invented to improve things? It's using a technique called diffusion, which, as I understand it, is the kind of thing that they use to basically create images from scratch. You know, if you've been on the internet and you can say, type in, show me 3 people in a quarry, it will make up a picture of 3 people in a quarry from nothing. So it's using that kind of technology along with the enhancement stuff to try and improve the image. This requires a lot of power. So initially, they said, right, that's it. We are going to make this online only because we've got a whole bunch of very, very fancy computers here. They're the only things that can cope with this kind of processing power. And to do that, you would then have to pay them per minute of footage. And it did add up. I did work out that if you were processing online, it probably cost you 300 or 400 quid to do half an hour's worth of video. So it wasn't cheap. On the user forums, all the users said, well, can't you give us something we can just use at home? I don't mind if it takes a long time, just give me something I can use at home. So they've now produced Starlight Mini. Starlight Mini is a cut down version of what they do online, but it will work on your local machine. And yes, it is slow. It's also only just come out, so it's been out about a week or so. We are now on beta 3 as I'm finishing this video recording. It will probably change a bit more in the future. There are things it doesn't do right. I'll mention a couple of these as we go through. On the other hand, it does produce very nice results. So let's dive into that, and then at the end of this video, I will do a comparison between several shots using Starlight and using my other favorite Iris. As I was making this video, version 3 of the beta came out. So I'd filmed most of it, and then version 3 came out, and they just shifted around where it appears. So in the video, most of the time, I'll be selecting progressive and digging out Starlight down here. And we'd also have try Starlight written at the top. Now with beta 3 it's changed, so you've basically got Starlight and Starlight Mini. Starlight is the one that if you choose that, you then have to go and pop it up to the cloud and render stuff. But you can do 10 seconds, or if in Powerland you can do 12 seconds for free. Other than that, you have to pay for stuff. But Starlight Mini is the one that I'll be looking at, particularly the one that I can do at home. And literally in beta 3, they took away the try Starlight and just put them down there. So that's the only thing that's changed between the two, apart from them evolving it. Of course, this is beta, so it might change a bit more. I'm looking at it as of the beta. So let's get into using Starlight. Now, to use Starlight Mini, first of all, you need the beta. So if you haven't got an up-to-date license, you can't use it. Obviously, it'll be out of beta at some point. You can only use it if you're actually paying for a current license. But you choose that, and there's very little in the way of parameters that you can fiddle with. You also notice it's not there if you do interlaced or progressive interlace. It's only there under regressive, so ideally you de-interlace this first. You can choose the size, so let me set the size to be the same thing as I did previously, 1920, and you can choose the frame rate. You can't use any of these other options with it. It does say it here, but you can't use motion deblur or stabilization or any of these other things. You have to process it and then bring the stuff back in. And yeah, it will take time. I mean, a lot of time. Because it takes so long, I come up to the codec settings and I choose image sequence. So normally I do a video file, which is fine, but if it goes wrong halfway through, the entire video file gets screwed up. Because this thing is going to take so long, I don't want it to go on for 15 hours doing something and then something horribly goes wrong with the computer and the whole thing is trashed. What I want to do is save it as it goes along. So I choose image sequence, and it makes up a bunch of still images, and then I can put them together afterwards in my editing program. And that does mean if it goes wrong halfway through, I've got all the still images that have been done so far have been processed, and I just need to start it going again. So the only other thing I would do, apart from setting the size and choosing Starlight Mini, would be make sure you're doing an image sequence and then export it. And then it goes into the queue, and then you have to wait. Now, like I said, I am on an NVIDIA 3060, which has got 12 gigabytes of RAM. I do say the minimum you need for this is a graphics card which has got 8 gigabytes of RAM, 16 gigabytes is recommended. You'd also have to have something which is a 20, 30, 40 or 50 series model. If you've got a 1060 or a 1660, I wouldn't even bother trying it, because there has been a lot of changes in technology and it uses some of that new technology which is in those new graphics cards to do this work. And you know, my best graphics card is a 3060. I want to upgrade it. I'd love to go out and buy a 5090, which is £2,000. Can't afford that unless I get another couple of million subscribers, which I really don't think is going to happen. Looking at the sort of things that I would like to buy, I'd probably like to buy something like a 5060 Ti. They've literally just brought this thing out, 5060 Ti with 16 gig of RAM, and it's about 400 quid. Beyond that, you go to a 5070 where you're looking about 600 quid. But those are the sort of graphics cards that you'd really be looking at. I was quite surprised it actually worked on this, to be honest, because this graphics card is a few years old. I do have another one, which is a 2080 Super. So it's a previous generation to my 3060, but being a 2080, it's better than a 3060. So it's a bit faster, but it has less RAM. It only has 8 gig of RAM, which is the minimum. And I did try it out on that, and I was actually surprised that it did work on that. Again, very, very slowly, but it did work. This thing here, as you can see, it still says loading model. It's saying 2 minutes has elapsed. It hasn't given me an estimated remaining time yet, so it hasn't really got anywhere. And it's doing 0 frames a second. On my graphics card, Starlight Mini does 0 frames a second. So it must mean it's doing 0.01 or 0.02 or something. So it's taking quite a bit of time. I can go and have a look at the place where I decided to make these. I just chose export, so it's gone into the same folder as all my original stuff. And because I chose a still image, it's made up a little folder for it. And then there'll be some still images coming in here when it actually gets around to doing something. Takes a little while to get started. Then eventually it starts clocking and then still images will start appearing. So this is slow. And you know, I can put up with it. I do CGI stuff. I render stuff out of a program called Blender, where a 10-second clip might take 20 hours to render because it's very, very complicated. So I'm used to doing stuff that takes my machine for ages. It's worth doing if you're going to get the quality out of it. And you know, it's a trade-off between, well, what can I get quickly? What can I get if I spend ages on it? You need to see the results. And of course, that's the thing I'm going to talk about next, results. Nice thing about this is whilst it's exporting, you can go back and do other things. So I can just close down this, come back into here. I could go back to my sources, load up another clip, and then I could do stuff to the other clip. Whilst I've been talking, it's done a few files. Here you can see the folder that's been created with some TIFFs inside of it. You might say, David, why did you choose TIFFs as opposed to something else? The options that we have inside of Topaz are TIFFs, PNGs, JPEGs, and so on. I have found with editing programs actually that if I export TIFFs out of an editing program, the same with Resolve and the same with Edius, if I export a TIFF and take it into a photographic program and then bring it back, it seems to get the color right all the time. If I export a PNG, the brightness levels change slightly. So that's why I stick with TIFFs generally. PNGs will be slightly smaller. JPEGs smaller still, but the thing is JPEGs, because they're heavily compressed, they will introduce other nonsense. They'll be smaller, but they'll start introducing other artifacts. And I don't want to do that. I'm going to take these stills and I am going to create a video file out of them in my editing program. So I want to keep it as clean as possible. That's why I'm using TIFFs. Could have used 16-bit as opposed to 8-bit. I'm not really changing the color on this. I'm upscaling it, so I think 8-bit's probably enough. Obviously the create new folder thing was ticked, which is why it went into its own little folder, and it's got these things about embedding model names. I mean, they're all fairly straightforward. That's why I have got a bunch of TIFFs in a folder. Just pop it into icon view and you can see there I've got the TIFFs, double click on it and you open it up. Now you won't see this properly unless I put it in an editing program and compare it, so I'll do that once I've done the whole video. But you might just look at the back of those ferns over there and say, they look a lot more like ferns than my other one did. I think that's what it gets right. Yeah, that is the upscaled iris. So you can see the look of the ferns there. You can see the look of the ferns here. That looks an awful lot more like a fern. But again, show you properly in a minute when I've done the proper comparison, which I'll do inside of Resolve. But you know, you can do that in any editing program. Another thing you might notice on these clips, or you'll notice if I point it out to you, is it's 2304 by 1728. And I told it to be 1920 wide. There is something strange with the way that Starlight scales things, which means that you put a number in and you get something else, and I haven't worked that out yet. Also, speed-wise, it does work better if you do certain things. Like if I chose 2 times size, as opposed to trying to put in 1920, so just double it. I mean, it won't come out as 1920, but it works a lot faster. So there's a lot of things still to be sort of worked through. This is in beta. I did just want to show you some of the results I'm getting at the moment, because in some cases I think it is doing quite a lot better results, but there are also some things that we need to work out, which will obviously become clear as this becomes not beta and time goes by. So here I have set up various shots for comparison purposes. And I've got the shot of the guy whose name is Anthony jumping out of the police box. I've got this shot of a bunch of people standing around, this shot of the quarry, this shot of another people in the quarry. So these two are particularly 8mm ones. These are ones that look particularly naff. And I did do the VHS shot as well of this guy. And I'm just going to compare the different results that I've got. Also, to make things simpler, I did bring them all in and convert them into movie files. So that's the first thing that I would do, is I would go off and find the still images. Let's take this shot. You can see I've got a whole bunch of TIFFs there. Take it, drag it, pop it into the project. I've got it in here. My next thing would be actually to select it. And there's various ways you can do this in Resolve, but when I've got a whole bunch of them, I will select it, go up to File, Media Management, and choose Transcode. Choose All Media. Decide where I'm going to stick it. And then on the video side, I would choose a format to put it into. Personally, I generally choose Grass Valley AVI files, but for this, I chose ProRes, just so it's in exactly the same format as the Iris ones. Choose Render at Source Resolution, and as long as here you say All Media, relink to new files. So literally I've clicked a few things here, but basically relink to new files means it's going to make an AVI file and put the AVI file in the place of that. The video, like I said, QuickTime ProRes Render at Source, start. And it converts it to a movie file, which I can now use a lot easier than I can use the still images. Of course, there's no sound. I'd have to match the original sound up with it as well. So I did that for all of them, and then I started using them on the timeline. Again, only doing the still image thing because it takes so long that I don't want the machine to crash halfway through and ruin the entire file. And you don't have to do the still images. You can do it into the MOV file, but like I said, if it crashes after doing 10 hours of rendering, you lose the whole thing. So there are various hassles. Is it worth it? Well, for a start, let's go to these first couple of clips here. If I turn off the Iris ones, you can see I've actually got two variations of this guy popping out the TARDIS. There's this one, and they're different sizes. I did one at 2x, and I did one where I set it to be 1920. The 2x one came out at this, which is 1536 by 1152, which is roughly twice the size of the original. The other one, which I set to 1920, came out to 2304. So there's obviously something going on there, which is still happening in the beta, which I've yet to understand fully. These are all rendered, by the way, in beta 2, because beta 3 literally came out after I'd rendered them. That's why I've got two different sizes. The one that I did at 2x took about 20 minutes to do this piece of video. This 5 seconds of video on my computer at 2x took about 20 minutes. The one that I set to 1920 that came out to be bigger, that took about 25-26 minutes. So it gives you a rough idea of how long these things were taking on my system. I only did those two, the rest of them I did at a bigger size, just so you can compare what it looks like at 2x to what it compares to something a bit bigger. At this sort of scaling, it doesn't look very much at all. If I zoom into it, let me put that at 100%. You can see the one that I've done at a higher resolution has got a better look on these ferns in the background. And since I'm doing this for quality, I'd probably do that. I really want it to come out to be 1920. So I'm waiting to work out why that's happening. So let's ignore those two. And I'm going to be comparing this to Iris. So let me turn the Iris layer back on again. And here you can see I've got the Iris version. And immediately, if you swap between the two, they're not quite lined up 100%, but you can see there is a definite difference between them. So that's Iris, that's Starlight. Just a little bit of extra sharpness around his eyes. Particularly in the background, these ferns have come out a lot better. Let me move it down a bit so you can see some more ferns there. So that's Iris, that's Starlight. The reason it's jumping is they're not lined up 100% because of course this is bigger than high def and I'm on a high def timeline, so I've actually had to scale that down using Resolve. So they're not lined up 100%, but that's why they're jumping. Just looking at that one, you see, I'd say probably the face is probably better because I can actually see the irises in the eyes, and that's the Iris version. If I go to the Starlight version, you can't see the irises in the eyes, it's slightly less sharp. And with this one, there's a bit more definition in the hair, but you also might say to yourself, well, maybe there's a bit too much. Maybe it's not quite as natural as that. If I pop back here so you can just see the ferns, obviously the ferns on the Starlight version are considerably better. You know, looking over here, looking at this nonsense. That's Iris, that's Starlight. Possibly slightly more detail there, but is it correct detail? I can see that little line there, but is it right? Is that more natural than the Starlight one? Is the Starlight one more natural? So you can see there is definitely a difference there. And when you pop between these two, there's definitely a difference there. Although, again, Iris, maybe the face is a bit sharper. I could just take the Starlight and add on an effect, simply just popping up the sharpness. So there I've just literally added a bit of sharpness to Starlight. So his eyes are popping out a bit more now. And yeah, I think Starlight looks more natural than that. This is Iris. This is Starlight. Yeah, I'm thinking there probably Starlight is better all round. Starlight, Iris, Starlight, Iris. Let's go and have a look at the archers. So again, this is Iris, this is Starlight. Now with Iris here, I did crank it up a bit. So I cranked up the detail to about 90%, I think. So maybe I cranked it up too much, and that's why I'm getting extra little wiggly bits around it. Whereas Starlight, slightly fuzzier, but a bit more natural. Let's look at the fuzzy vegetation in the background. Starlight, Iris, Starlight, Iris. I mean, on things like this, I do notice when I'm looking at the ground, say, let's come to that ground down there. This was just a piece of wasteland, a piece of dirt wasteland. That's what Iris did to it. That's what Starlight does to it. And I've got more of an echo around there. So you notice very, very subtle differences. It's not like, wow, Starlight is mega, mega better. It is better. Is it mega better? No, it isn't. Is it worth the extra time? That's something you have to decide for yourself. But it is that kind of difference. It's subtle, but nicer. I do think the Starlight isn't looking quite as sharp, but suppose again, let's go into this one and just add a little bit of sharpness and now compare the two. See, now I've got some sharpness in there, and it's still, to me, it's still looking like more natural ground than the Iris one. So to me, Starlight wins. That's Starlight, Iris, Starlight, Iris. You know, Starlight got rid of the echo around the, because, you know, old-fashioned video always produced a bit of an extra line around the edge. Starlight got rid of that. So yeah, I think Starlight wins there. It's now got sharper because I've added a bit of extra sharpness in Resolve. If I take off that extra sharpness, we have Starlight, not Starlight. But you know, I'm getting more on the Iris, I'm getting more nonsense around his ears and things like that. This is still better than Proteus, and I am still very happy with the results from Iris. I think Starlight is a little bit better. Come to this shot, and this one is really a naff shot. Something I actually filmed on 8mm, so it wasn't even high 8, and yet it looks pretty terrible. If I put the original on there. Now this is the original footage as scaled and de-interlaced in Resolve, and Resolve actually does pretty good scaling. It also does, if you've got the studio version, it does this DaVinci AI neural engine de-interlacing, which I also think is very good. It's my favorite de-interlacing apart from QTMGC, which is a free thing, and I can use that in ADS 11 using the BAT server. That is the original standard def footage scaled up in Resolve. So obviously that is really, really bad. Turn that off, you get the Iris version, which is a lot better. Not perfect, but obviously it's got a lot more definition on it. You know, DV scaled up and de-interlaced, much better version with Iris. Now let's compare that to Starlight. So I'll turn off Iris. Again, slightly different because I haven't got sizes exactly the same, but yeah, I mean, that's Iris, that's Starlight. To me, it's more natural on the faces. I've got rid of a lot of the echo that I've got around this guy here, all this double echo here. It's still there a bit, but it's got rid of a lot of it, so it's cleaned it up. And the background to me looks more natural. It's better. Starlight is better. Obviously took me a lot longer, but it's better. Look at what happens when her face turns. That's much more natural in Starlight than it is in Iris. And Iris I have been very, very happy with, because compare that to DV. Yeah, it's way, way better. Starlight is the next step up for quite a bit of time. Let's pop onto this shot. Again, this is a really, really horrible shot. This is the Iris version. So this has already been upscaled. It's particularly awful, this shot. Sometimes with Iris, I end up with this cross-hatchy pattern appearing and disappearing, which is, again, annoying. It starts off like that, but that's all taken from the original. So if I compare that, let's stick it to 100%. Let's compare that to what Starlight does. So this is Iris, Starlight. Iris, Starlight. Now, Starlight has introduced a more of a cross-hatchy pattern on everything. I mean, at least it's consistent, but it is there. But if you look at their faces, you look at beyond the crosshatchy pattern, you look at the ground, it looks more like ground. Starlight, Iris. Starlight, Iris. Starlight, Iris. And finally, let's get through to Rab C. Nesbitt, as I call him. It isn't. It's actually a Scottish actor called Gregor Fisher, who did this advert, which you may or may not remember, for cigars back in either the 70s or the 80s. And yeah, I just thought, what the hell, I'll use that. So here is the Iris version, and here's the Starlight one. So Iris, Starlight. Iris, Starlight. And with those two, well, yeah, the Starlight one has got a bit more definition on his face if you look at the tie. Again, it's, I suppose, same kind of definition, but more realistic, whereas this is more like a bit of super sharpness, if you like. And maybe I could go into the Iris settings and maybe turn down the amount I sharpened it or brightened up and get something which is closer realistically to that. But I fiddled the bit and I get pretty close, but not quite. By the way, I have brightened these up slightly. I did say when I was looking at them originally they are very dull. So I did come into these and I put the same effect on both of them. I brightened it up because obviously the whole image was down there. Again, that happens a lot with old-fashioned VHS. The brightness dims. But with these two, yeah, I think Starlight is better, but it's pretty close. When I've done sort of close-ups of faces, I have thought sometimes Iris does a better job than Starlight at pulling out some of the subtle details that you've got in there. Now let me just set this up for you so I can play through with them side by side. So I'll just pop it up full screen so you can immediately see there the better looking ferns, the slightly better looking wood on the police box on its side. And let me just play it and you'll see it all moving. And you know, they're both good. I think Starlight in most cases is actually a little bit better, especially if I add on a little bit of extra sharpness, because of course I wouldn't stop here. I'd come into my editing program and I'd change the color a bit and tart it up so it looks a bit better. But looking at those, Starlight is cleaner, slightly better defined. Hopefully you can see all this on YouTube and it hasn't mangled it. If you own Topaz, I would try it out for yourself. See what you think and see whether you think it is worth the extra time in processing that it's going to take you. I am lucky I have got several computers, so I can sit one computer at the side just doing all this processing while I can work on something else. If you've only got one computer and you've got to set it going Starlight, you probably won't be able to use that machine for anything other than emails whilst it's processing, because it'll be banging away on the graphics card using a lot of your RAM. If you've only got one machine, it's a problem. If you've got a couple of machines so you can work on one while this is processing, then you can set it going and leave it going for a few hours. Apart from the time, obviously it's going to cost you a bit more on electricity because it's making the graphics card work. The graphics card is one of the things that uses the most power inside the machine. So it's going to cost you a bit on that. Decide for yourself if it's worth it. I mean, I think Starlight will get better. I think it will get probably quicker. They'll do some optimizations. And I will hopefully buy a better graphics card so I can do it quicker as well. But on the other hand, the whole nature of it, unless they can do some magic, which is entirely possible, I don't know how you program these things, but unless they can actually do some major magic, I imagine it's still going to be slow. So is it worth it for the extra quality? I'm in the process of doing the last episode for my Doctor Who story. And my last episode is 40 minutes. That means I've got over 40 minutes worth of stuff that I need to upscale, which is going to be tying up my computer for an awful lot of time. And it's going to slow down my working as well, because I'll have to wait for it to be upscaled before I can do proper effects on it. Is it worth it? Is what I have to decide for myself. Knowing me, and the fact that I've been working on this Doctor Who thing since 1990 something, so I'm after the best quality I can possibly get, I'm probably going to do it, just for that little bit of extra quality. Up to the Starlight coming out, I was very, very happy with the results from Iris. So anyway, I hope that helps. It gives you an idea of what to expect. I think when the final thing comes out, if things have changed a bit, I'll probably do another little video about that, where you'll get to see this guy jumping out of a police box again and again and again. Now all I've got to do is the sound, which I shall do with some other AI stuff that I've got in Resolve and some VST plugins. But got to remember, I mean, I'm looking at all these things and I get so carried away with trying to make it look really, really good. You got to remember how crap it was in the first place. And for me, Topaz definitely does the best job of all the programs in improving the quality. Yeah, you might have to fiddle a bit more. Yeah, it costs a bit more than other programs, but it does do a much better job than all the other programs. And sometimes you have to look at it and think, wow, that's clever. Anyway, hope you found those two videos useful. Like I said, I'll probably do another one when they've finished off Starlight. If you want to know more about what I do, you need some assistance on some video editing stuff or something, just get in touch, david@dvctraining.co.uk. Obviously, I'm still building systems, mainly for people in the UK, so get in touch if you're interested in that. And visit my website, www.dvctraining.co.uk, for more information. But apart from that, hope you enjoyed this video. Obviously, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, blah, 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 blah. And I'll see you next time.